Find the chat and type where you're calling from today. And we can test out the reaction buttons, like raising your hand and sending some love. I can start with that. Let's see here. Okay, so I'm Ashley from Michigan. We got lots of Wisconsins here. Bree, Sheboygan, Iowa, nice.
Irene Lieberman.
New Glarus. Awesome. All righty. So we are delighted that you are with us tonight. In case you aren't familiar with us, Midwest Women's Herbal is a women-led and women-empowered organization that has been producing herbal and personal growth events in person and virtually for over 13 years. To find out more, you can visit our website, midwestwomensherbal.com or herbwomenclassroom.com. So welcome to Traversing the Psychedelic Landscape, a community conversation with Eugenia Bone and Linda Conroy. I'm Ashley Oman, and I will be your hostess tonight. If you happen to attend the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference or Mycelium Mysteries in the last 4 years, you may recognize me as the conference announcer and lead work exchange coordinator. I first came to the conference in 2018 as part of the work exchange team, and of course I fell in love with it. So I have been a part of the coordinating team now for 5 years. With us tonight is Alicia Gassaway and Courtney Hansen. They will be handling the tech support. So if you find yourself with any audio or visual glitches, you can reach out to either of them through the personal messages or email herbwomen@gmail.com. I see that there are many other members of our coordinating team here tonight. It takes a strong village of women to produce events like this and our conferences. So please give them a lot of love and gratitude. I'm thankful for each and every one of them, truly. We would like to begin all of our community conversations with the reading of our mission and vision statements. So I'm going to pass it over to Alicia and she can take it away.
Thanks, Ashley. So our mission statement: Midwest Women's Herbal provides herbal education and opportunities for transformation. Immersed in the tradition of the village herbalists, grandmothers, mothers, daughters, sisters, and children gather in a co-created village. Through earth-centered healing and nourishment, we ally with the plants that grow around us. From the ground up, we connect to weave ourselves, our families, and our communities into the dynamic spiral of health. And our vision statement: we live in a world where the feminine is honored and respected, where women stand fully in their power, acknowledging their wisdom, skills, and innate healing abilities.
Thank you, Alicia. In the coming days, we'll be sending you some emails with amazing offers, and we want to make sure that you receive them. So we ask that you add our email, herbwomen@gmail.com, to your contacts. This will ensure that it goes into your inbox and not into your spam or promotional folders. And we have a couple other strategies that can help you avoid that as well. So after tonight's conversation, when we do send you that email with the coupon code in it, go ahead and hit reply and say hello or hi or whatever you want. This lets your email server know that we're friends, and all of our emails should now come to your inbox. So please keep all questions and comments in the chat focused on tonight's topic. If you have questions about Midwest Women's Herbal or our work, please contact us at herbwomen@gmail.com. We would like to thank all of our sponsors who make hosting events like this possible: Moonwise Herbs, Mountain Rose Herbs, Frontier Co-op, Goodland Creative, Peaceful Parlor, Herb Farm Pacific Botanicals, Host Defense Mushrooms, Great Lakes Herb Fair, Red Earth Gathering, Wisconsin Mycological Society, Wisconsin Public Radio, the Driftless Folk School, DNA Hemp, Wish Garden Herbs, 4 Elements, Jade Counseling, and Natural Awakenings magazine. Sponsorship is open to everyone at any level and helps support the many scholarships that we award every year. so you can check out our website for sponsorship opportunities. Have you checked out the Midwest Women's Herbal virtual learning space? The Herb Women Classroom has both free and paid offerings with hundreds of hours of learning available about mushrooms, herbs, nourishment, and personal growth. Every learning module comes with a monthly community Q&A with herbal educator Linda Conroy live on Zoom. This is a unique opportunity for online learning and an amazing chance for you to spend time with Linda and get your questions answered. Individual conference recordings are also available, as well as the complete conference packages. There's something for everyone here. Tonight, we're excited to announce that our 2024 In Our Own Hands Women's Wellness Series full recording package is now available. This lineup of dynamic women include Linda Conroy, Phyllis Light, Robin Klein, Julie Charette Nunn, Dr. Cornelia Cho, Sherry Winston, and Bevan Clare. And you can watch all 7 recordings at your own pace. The sold-out Midwest Women's Herbal Conference at Camp Helen Brockman in Almond, Wisconsin was held on May 24th through 26th. Thank you for everyone who attended. We are grateful to the many presenters, coordinators, kitchen, and work exchange participants for a very successful event, particularly with the extra rain that we experienced this year. The recording package for our main conference will also be available for purchase soon. We're especially excited to announce registration is now open for the 8th Annual Mycelium Mysteries on September 20th through 22nd. This weekend-long Women's Mushroom Conference will focus on understanding fungi as the grandmothers of our ecosystem. Keynote speakers include Eugenia Bone, who is on this call with us tonight, as well as Rose Tercy, Susan Leopold from United Plant Savers. We have a special event coming up in November from the 8th to the 10th, and spaces are filling up fast. This is Reading the Body with Margie Flint at Bethel Horizons Retreat Center in Dodgeville, Wisconsin. This 3-day immersion will consist of both lecture and hands-on learning, with ample opportunity for questions to understand what your body is saying to you. Both experienced and beginner herbalists will find great benefit from this immersion. Sorry, my lips are a little dry. At the end of tonight's conversation, we're going to be giving away a copy of Eugenia's book, a full recording package to this year's Mycelium Mysteries Conference, and Fungal Fundamentals class module from the Herb Women Classroom, which is really cool, where you can take a deep dive into learning all about mushrooms. You do need to be present here tonight to win any of these amazing giveaways, so be sure to stay until the end. All right. I'm honored to introduce Linda Conroy, visionary and founder of the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference, Mycelium Mysteries Women's Mushroom Conference, the In Our Own Hands Women's Wellness Series, the Herb Women Classroom, and owner of Moonwise Herbs. She also offers in-person and virtual learning apprenticeship programs. Linda is a bioregional herbalist who has been practicing and teaching herbalism for over 30 years. So welcome, Linda.
Ashley. Well, listening to Ashley, you can see how busy our team is in trying to bring a lot of learning experiences out there. So I was just really, it's a lot, and hearing it really reminds me how much we're doing, and I hope that people are taking advantage of it. And one of my favorite things, we've been having so much fun offering these community conversations and bringing them to you, and the women that we've been talking to. It's just been such a delight to have conversations and learn new things and share, and also to look at the prelude of what is going to be happening down the road. So tonight, I am just so excited to be here and to be talking to Eugenia Bone. I met Eugenia 8 years ago at our first Mycelium Mysteries Mushroom Conference. She was our keynote speaker at that event. And it was really quite a wonderful experience to listen to her talk about her journey with mushrooms. And at that time, when I invited her, I knew of her as a chef and a nature writer and a journalist. And during her keynote talk, she spoke about the topic we're going to talk about tonight, which is the topic of her up and coming book called Have a Good Trip. And so seeing 8 years later, it comes around to that this is what she's writing about, a really prevalent topic, a topic that's touching a lot of different communities, and a lot of people are thinking about it and seeing how it might be beneficial, what the pros and cons might be. So I'm super excited to be here with Eugenia and be talking about this topic tonight, and the fact that she's also going to be speaking at our conference in the fall and talking about this topic, as well as community herbalism, community mycology, and putting together a community cookbook, which I'm excited to hear about that as well at the conference. So I do want to read to you her bio, because I can say some personal things, but when I look at her bio, I can see she's quite accomplished in many ways, and I want you to hear that. So I'm going to read her bio. Eugenia is an internationally known food and nature writer. Her work has appeared in many anthologies, magazines, and newspapers, including the New York Times, the National Lampoon, Savor, Gourmet, BBC Science, and the Wall Street Journal, where she is a frequent book reviewer. She is a member of the American Society of Science Writers and former president of the New York Mycological Association. She is a master preserver and a member of the faculty at the New York Botanical Garden, where she teaches classes on psychedelic mushrooms. She's the author or co-author of 9 books on food and nature. Her upcoming book, is called Have a Good Trip, and she has been nominated for a variety of awards, including the Colorado Book Award and James Beard Award. Eugenia has been featured on many dozen radio shows and podcasts. She has lectured widely in diverse venues like the New York Public Library, the Denver Botanical Garden, and the Rubin Museum. She is featured in the documentary directed by Louis Schwartzberg, Fantastic Fungi, which came out in 2019, and in the Netflix children's show about food, Waffles and Moki, the mushroom episode, produced by Michelle Obama's Higher Ground Productions. So, as you can see, Eugenia is quite accomplished, and she's been traversing this world in many ways for quite a long time. So I want to say something before we get started, just so everyone is aware. We're going to be talking about psychedelic mushrooms, and we know that they're being utilized in different ways as medicine, and they are considered a drug by the federal government. And I just want to say this because it's important to realize that even if they've been decriminalized in certain states, according to the federal government, they still are considered a drug. And so we need to be aware of that. We're not making any recommendations here tonight. We're not going to be talking about any personal opportunities to give you personal advice. This isn't medical advice. What we're going to be talking about is the landscape and what Eugenia's seen as she's been writing this book, and give you kind of a purview of what's happening. But if you're looking for personal guidance or advice, please seek out your own healthcare provider or someone who can guide you in that way. So we just wanted to make that disclaimer before we get started. So on that note, welcome, Eugenia.
Thank you, Linda. I'm thrilled to be here. I love the Mycelium Mysteries. I can't believe it's been 8 years. So it's just wonderful to reconnect with this community.
Well, I know when we were talking, we started about talking with a quote, to maybe start out with a quote from you from one of your books, previous books, and then thinking about expanding on this quote and seeing what your new book, Have a Good Trip, where that has brought you in terms of thinking from this quote. So the quote is, "Mushrooms were the window by which I came to understand nature in a deeper way." And you had said that this book took you in a different direction. And I was wondering maybe if you could say a few words about that.
Yes, absolutely. So that quote comes from Mycophilia, which was a book I wrote about hunting mushrooms and learning about basic mycology. And yeah, mushrooms were the way that all of a sudden the world of biology opened up to me. Researching Have a Good Trip and participating in some trips of my own, turned out, allowed me to adapt that quote. And I actually have it in the new book. And what it is mushrooms, magic mushrooms, turned out to be the window by which I understood myself in a deeper way. And that was profoundly different, although still connected. I find the understanding the self ultimately, the more I understand about myself, the better I am at participating in the world at large.
So it's interesting when you're just saying that. I'm thinking about the interest in this topic that's exploding. And I imagine that a lot of people are looking for what you discovered is more understanding of the self and our our relationship to ourselves. And I know, you're a journalist, and so you're looking at this from your own experience, but you're also looking at the purview of the landscape of who is this touching? What's the interest? What did you see? What did you learn about that as you were writing this book?
So that's a great and big question. So my own personal
Two highlights.
journey is like not so prevalent in this book. I kind of wrap things up in the epilogue, but by and large, it is it's not biographical in that respect. The book really looks at the different ways people are using psychedelic mushrooms today, and I really focus on psilocybin mushrooms. So I'm not writing about Amanita muscaria or gymnopolis or any of the other psychedelics, which tend to be consumed by foragers, people who are into a little more advanced mycology, but rather psychedelic, psilocybin mushrooms, shrooms, which people collect but are most commonly cultivated. So of those people, I interacted with numerous different communities, different groups of people who were involved in, I guess, variations of the same self-discovery process that, I had a taste of too. There were the people I met and hung out with and interviewed, many people who were taking were consuming magic mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms, for wellness, to improve their life. They weren't feeling ill or maladjusted or unhappy, but wanted a deeper, it was a wellness thing to improve their life. Other folks I talked to had issues that they were hoping the mushrooms might, they were hoping the mushrooms might help them with their symptoms. So folks with depression, OCD, PTSD, anorexia nervosa. I talked to a lot of folks who were using the mushrooms to understand the self, but in terms of societal ills. For example, spent a lot of time with an autistic group every Sunday for months. I joined their Zoom classes and or their Zoom meetings, and I learned so much about my autistic fellow citizens. And it was incredibly important to me to gain that knowledge. But one of the things I learned from this group, which uses psychedelics, was that they weren't using psychedelics to stop being autistic. They were, they weren't unhappy being autistic. They were using the psychedelics in order to help create empathy for themselves, to help forgive themselves and accept themselves when they would be rejected socially. So it was a societal ill, actually. There was our rejection of the typical rejection of the neurodivergent person that they were trying to address. I mean, I talked to religious groups, people who were starting churches, who were creating religion using entheogens, using psychedelic mushrooms as religious sacraments. And I spoke with established religious groups like old, 80-year-old Quakers who are saying, wow, this is a way to have a we could potentially have a mystical experience. Maybe we should talk to the friends about it. I so established religions that were looking into it. I spoke with all kinds of party groups, ravers, spent some time at Burning Man. And these self-involved and these groups that had come together around place. So geographically located psychedelic integration groups. It goes on and on. The book is wide ranging, but it looks at all these groups and how they have led the science, and how they cope in their own vacuum of the bubble of their own experience.
So that's fascinating, all those different groups. And I'm wondering, is there a way, you said they're informing the science, is there a way that they're interfacing with the science deliberately, or is it like, how is that happening? Because we know, there's certainly lots of interest in science in the medical community, in psychedelics as a modality. So how is that interface happening, or is it?
Well, I mean, it certainly is. I mean, for example, and a book just came out on this subject. I think the author's name is Kempner. Anyway, the folks that suffer from cluster headaches, these are a particularly nasty form of, it's like a migraine. It's not a migraine, but it's similar in intensity, but they tend to be really frequent and repetitive, happen particularly to young men. Cluster headaches, they also are colloquially known as suicide headaches. One guy even shot himself in the eye because the headache was so horrible. He actually survived without any brain damage, but his headaches continued. Cluster headaches are horrible. And so on a chat board for cluster headaches sufferers, folks were sharing like their various ways they were treating them, because there is no real treatment out there. And one person said, well, I take a low dose of psilocybin. Other people started trying it and weighing in. Their anecdotal data was noticed by a researcher and or a number of researchers, and they said, wow, this is very interesting. Let's design a study. So that's how the community of users and their anecdotal data leads the science. I mean, it's like, and to be honest with you, the earliest example of that is the indigenous Mazatec and other groups from Central America who experimented with this drug on their bodies, and the body of data that they shared is, led to all of this that's happening here in the United States. So anecdotal data has this, one of the things it's primarily what I write about, because frankly, the science is nascent. There's just not a whole lot out there. If you really read the papers, it's like, give me something to really chew on. It's just not there yet. So I turn to anecdotal information, and, of course, it's not 100%, it's not necessarily reproducible, but in quantity, it's persuasive. And that's exactly the kind of data that is like microdosing right now. It's all anecdotal that's out there, but it's interesting enough to inspire researchers to say, well, let's develop a study and see.
So I noticed that you are calling these drugs, and I know we spoke about that, and I think it would be really helpful to explain your choice of terminology.
Yeah. I'm glad. Thank you for bringing that up, because I know I've just bumped into people who try to correct me and say, no, you have to say medicine. And I think not. And here's why. The language we use, the terminology we use to describe magic mushrooms and their properties, their psychedelic properties, vary based on intention. So for someone who is trying to heal let's say, they're trying to heal or alter the or suppress the symptoms of a disease or of a syndrome like phantom leg pain, chronic pain or depression. For them, using these mushrooms, it's a medicine. For them, it's a medicine. But for somebody who is using psychedelic mushrooms as part of a worship service, as part of their spiritual journeys, as in either in a church or in the evolution or building of a church, for them, it's not a medicine, it's an entheogen, right? It's a sacrament, it's an entheogen. And for those that are partying, going to Burning Man and watching the blinky lights, they're shrooms. So for me to select a word like medicine or shroom or entheogen as when I, for general usage, would be in a way to prejudice what I'm writing, what I'm reporting. So the only thing that all these different intentions and uses have in common is that it's a drug. It's a drug that affects our body like any other drug. It is a drug. You have to separate your mind from the baggage of drugs as being like, oh, scary or bad or addictive or whatever, or made by big pharma or whatever your thing is. And, like Courtney, can you throw up in the chat a definition, like a Google definition of drug? You'll see it's really benign. And that is why I use it in my language and in my book, unless the context, or unless it's a quote, of course, or the context is such that, I'm writing about a psychedelic church, and I say, well, the entheogen that they prefer is ayahuasca or whatever, then I'll use it. But otherwise, it's a drug.
So here's the definition that Courtney brought up. Thank you, Courtney. She says, drug, a medicine or other substance which has a physiological effect when ingested or otherwise introduced into the body.
Yeah, it's the only thing we can all agree on. It's the only neutral term, in my opinion. And that's why I use it. But there's a lot of funny, not funny, but there's a lot of nomenclature in the psychedelic world that is, evolving, like people wanting to say that a trip is a ceremony. And, that's another kind of loaded word because it implies a certain kind of use, which, I'm not against, but I don't, but as a journalist, I can't, I'm doing a disservice to the reader by using ceremony outside of a context or a quote.
And that's so important because what I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're writing this from the lens of a journalist and you're trying to report on something and give people the information of a landscape. You're not trying to convince them of one particular thing or another.
100%. Plus, I know people take those positions. I personally don't feel at all prepared to do that. And I question the wisdom. I think it's tricky to do it because harms are underreported, but very real. I read this Substack by a philosopher named Jules Evans called Ecstatic Integration, where he reports on harms all over in all different aspects of psychedelia. So it's not just mushrooms, which is my particular niche. And it's pretty freaking alarming. I mean, there's a lot of things that are going on and you're not hearing about them. And it's important, I think, to keep in mind that it's important to keep in mind not to play loosey-goosey with these substances.
And when I hear you say that, One of the things when I'm making choices for myself to do something or to partake in something, I like to have solid information of the pros and the cons of, what I might be participating in. And then that's how I feel like I can make an informed, wise choice.
I mean,
So
that's what's hard with psychedelics because so little is known. So I felt like writing this book, I was like, wherever possible, I wrote about the knowns, I wrote about what's unknown, and I wrote about what's unknowable. So that was like the constant, it was like, everything fell into one of those categories, and one of the things that's unknowable is how you are going to react. Everybody's brain chemistry, everybody's physiology, everybody's emotional and mental history is unique.
absolutely true of, yes, as any substance that you're taking, you don't know. In terms of that, what are some things that you saw were a couple things that are known, a couple things that are unknown, and some guideposts you might offer as far as some things that might be harmful that people might want to be aware of?
So I'm writing it. So I write a Substack, a free Substack, and I'm writing this essay right now about species and cultivars because it happens all the time when somebody says, "Oh, I'm microdosing," or "I take mushrooms once in a while." I go, "Okay, which one are you taking?" And they have no idea. They're probably taking psilocybe cubensis because that's the most commonly cultivated species. But there's a lot of different cultivars. I mean, and they make they really are very different. And then I say, okay, if they know, well, psilocybe cubensis, I go, do you know what cultivar? Rarely does anyone but real aficionados have a clue. And yet they make a big difference. Oregon, which has legalized psilocybin for therapeutic purposes, they have clinics and things now. They don't allow any of the wood lover. The only mushroom species that you can serve is psilocybe cubensis because some of the other ones, and it's not even clear exactly which ones, can cause a syndrome called wood lovers paralysis, which is can be so people eat the mushroom and then they lose they become paralyzed, maybe in their just legs and arms, but it can be lips and some people even their lungs, in very rare cases the lungs, but by and large it's like legs and hands, and so people will fall over and they'll not be able to move until it's worn off. Sometimes that can last minutes, sometimes it can last the entire trip. Sometimes it is intermittent. I had a campmate at Burning Man who ate a like really sketchy mini muffin somebody gave her, and she spent 4 hours in our party tent like terrified because she couldn't move. Now it's not so harmful unless it happens while you're swimming or in the snow. Or as in the case of one poor guy who fell against a heater and had terrible burns, he couldn't move away. But it's who knows about wood lovers paralysis? Not many people. So so knowing a little mycology can go a long way. Same thing goes for the cultivars. So you might say, oh, I take a certain dose of psilocybe cubensis. I like a low dose. Maybe I microdose, and I take 200 milligrams. Well, what that 200 milligrams is going to do is it might not be subperceptual, which is what you're going for with a microdose. If you're taking albino penis envy, that's a cultivar that's twice or 3 times as strong as golden teacher. So these different cultivars, and it's like the difference between a Roma and a beefsteak tomato, right? Same species, different breeds. And all these cultivators are like breeding kind of these wacky mushrooms, but some of them for strength. You take a albino penis envy cultivar of psilocybe cubensis, and you might not be able to drive, whereas on a subperceptual dose of something, you should be able to drive. So knowing your cultivars is also an important, I mean, just knowing what you're taking, you know, that's one of the things I try to share in the book. And there are things you can know, but again, these are general principles, because what is subperceptual or a kind of, you know, what they call a museum dose, so just a sort of casual dose where you can still, you know, go to the museum without freaking out, or what would be a heroic dose, a big giant trip where you're down for the whole, it varies hugely among people, hugely. So, and can be affected by things like your, I know I'm going all over the place right now, but they can be affected by things like your drug history. If you have a history of taking SSRIs, that can affect what a dose, what kind of dose you can take, what a dose does. So there's many factors. They are known, but not definitive. Now, that's one thing that's really hard to nail in this subject.
Well, it's really connected to what you said before you started on this topic, is
Yeah.
that individual, that how it's going to affect individuals is going to vary.
That's
and yeah.
yeah.
And so what are some things people can do to create a container for them? I always think of containers for these things, you know, it's not trying to control it in any way, but create a container for themselves or with other people, or to be able to, you know, mitigate any harm from a potential, you know, reaction that might not be as pleasant as some other reactions.
Well, I think that you know, it's pretty intuitive. I mean, dose plus intention affects safety. So if you are if you're taking a very small dose because if you're taking a microdose because you want to see if those effects help you, and then that's going to be subperceptual, and you don't have to worry about your set and setting because it's just your regular life. And so your intention in using that is, you know, is to not trip, and so and your safety is going to be hopefully assured under those circumstances. But if you are planning on taking a large dose for you, and you do not prepare a setting that's going to be safe for the duration of that experience, let's say you take a large dose in a place where you can't stay put, then the chances of you having an upsetting experience or a bad trip or otherwise encountering trouble is going to increase. So it's a little bit of a formula that one would apply, which is really just good sense, I think, in order to protect yourself. And that is, what am I taking? Where am I taking it? Can I stay put? And are there any people around that are going to go take me the wrong way or the right way? Are there people who are going to protect me, or are there people who are going to take advantage of me in a vulnerable situation? Which really leads me to the different places and the different businesses that people can sign up for when they want to try these drugs. For example, you can go on retreat in a place where psychedelics are legal, like Jamaica or the Netherlands. And when going on these retreats, and I have been on a retreat in Jamaica, it's you're putting yourself in a potentially vulnerable, well, you are in a vulnerable position. So you want to be very careful about who has access to you under those circumstances, which means you got to do your research. You got to figure out how many sitters does the retreat have? I mean, if it's one for every 6 people, is that going to work? If one person is trying to run outside, another person is stripping, and another person is crying their eyes out, you know, there's a lot of precautions to consider, and includes trusting your gut. If somebody is like, you're hanging out with somebody and they say, let's do these drugs together, and they feel sketchy to you, forget it. Same thing goes with going on retreat. Even if you've shelled out the thousands of bucks to go, if it feels sketchy, go home, because bad trips usually resolve, but sometimes they don't.
Yeah, they can leave some residual lingering pain and confusion.
Yeah. I mean, derealization, like, do you all remember that story about the fellow who tried to bring down a passenger plane? He was he had he had terrible depression. He had done mushrooms like 4 days before, and wasn't able to sleep. So he had not been sleeping for 4 days. And insomnia is a side effect some people experience. He was going through what some folks have suggested was derealization. He himself said, I didn't know if I was in a dream or in real life. And at one point, he's in this plane. He was a pilot, so he got to sit next to the pilots up front in the plane. And he tried to bring the plane down, and he grabbed for one of the controls. And he afterwards, and they stopped him, they tied him up and whatever. But afterwards, he said, I was just trying to stop the dream. I was just trying to get reality back. Derealization is a worst case scenario, but it does happen to some people. Yeah.
So on that note, because these are things we want to be aware of, from writing this book, what do you see as the potential that you're excited about in terms of having this be more on people's radar screen in all these different communities and these different arenas? What are you excited about? What do you think? What do you think it's going to offer us to explore further?
I think the main thing that this book will offer is, well, a couple of things. One is, I think that people who read this book might be less inclined to get in trouble if they use these drugs. The other thing that I think is kind of exciting about this book is that it encourages and provides some tools for being responsible for your own mind, which is key. A lot of folks right now are just like giving themselves up, to the hype. Like, I just want to, my OCD is so bad. I just want to take it. I don't care. I just want to take, I don't care about the dose. I don't care about the setting. I don't care about my, vulnerability. I just want to get past. It's like the guy that shot himself in the eye with a gun when he had cluster headache. So I'm hoping that it just provides this basic information that will help folks make these good decisions and good decisions for themselves. And then finally, I hope and I think that the book will help folks understand that these are natural substances. These are mushrooms. They vary between species, between specimens in in any particular place. They're like, they are unpredictable within a framework of sort of predictability. They have a beautiful roles potentially in evolutionary history. It makes sense that there's psilocybin in mushrooms. At least that's what some evolutionary biologists are pointing out. So I think it's nice to connect back to the fact that this is an organism growing in nature, prolific all over, especially on the coast in the USA, on the coasts and in the southeastern states. But it's a prolific mushroom. And, if it's a doorway to getting folks interested in nature in general and mycology, well, I hope it does that too.
Nice. One last thing I'm hoping you might just make a couple of comments about is that, we are a women-led and women-run organization, and we've been really interested in the women mycologists who have come before us, even people like Beatrix Potter and, women who weren't even allowed in the sciences, but explored mushrooms anyway. And one of the people I'm aware of who is our foremother of this strain of work is Maria Sabina, and I'm wondering if you have any words to say about her, because I hold her close to my heart with some sadness sometimes, and just wondered if you had anything you wanted to maybe say.
So for the folks in the room that don't know who she is, Maria Sabina was the shaman who turned Gordon Wasson on to magic mushrooms in the 50s. And he wrote a story in Life magazine about the experience in it. And the editors of Life magazine called it, they coined the name magic mushrooms. And the story, Life magazine was read by millions. And the story really excited the imagination of a lot of people, and Americans started traveling to Maria Sabina's village in the the Mazatec Sierras, this little conservative agricultural village where she lived, and they were looking for her mushrooms and to trip, and some people have criticized Maria Sabina for participating in the kind of commercialization of the mushroom, because she would give it to people who came. And unfortunately, a lot of folks, Americans, would go to her village and they take the mushrooms, but not in the ceremonial way that it was part of their tradition. But, they trip during the day and they make love in the cornfields and just generally upset everybody and upset this conservative culture. So Maria Sabina really became a scapegoat for this hippie phenomenon that happened. But there is a historian, and I quote him in my book, who said, despite all that, Maria Sabina was doing what she was called to do. She was called to treat whoever came her way. She didn't select who had the right to have this experience and resolve whatever was going on in them, or that her job as a shaman was to provide these mushrooms. And so she was true to herself to the end, even though she died impoverished and I think maybe of malnutrition. Even it was a really horrible end for a very special woman. But I think that's maybe a message that our group here can hold on to, because she was, despite criticism, despite aggression from military and politicians in Mexico, she stayed true to her job, which was to treat the people she encountered.
Beautiful, thank you. That's my feeling about it as well. So thank you so much for saying those words. We're coming to the end of our time. I want to open it up for some questions to see if anybody has any questions they want to pose. And then I had a couple things I just wanted to say. Does anybody have any questions? I didn't see any come in the chat, but I just wanted to open it up in case anybody does have any questions. Well, think about it for a minute. If anything comes to mind, please do put it out there. I want to say that, Eugenia, in this conversation, I understand the title of your book more fully. And I'm really grateful for that because I see that you're inviting people and giving them information where you can make it more possible that they'll have a good trip.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I didn't get that as fully until this conversation. So thank you for that. That was very clear in what you shared tonight.
Yeah. I hope so, because having a bad trip really sucks. A lot of people.
Right. Well, and I mean, when I heard the title at first, I got that, you were going to talk about having a good trip, but I think what I'm hearing here is that you wrote this book and you're providing some information and some guideposts, that people can look at to make it more possible to have a good trip than, and I'm just really grateful for that intention that I heard. Am I hearing it correctly?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I'm not telling anybody what to do. It's impossible, and it would be wrong to tell people what to do, or even, to give like any kind of recommendations. I except when I'm talking about my own experience, then I can. But rather I lay out where there's science, I lay out the science, but I lay out anecdotal consensus. So after talking to lots of people about, say, bad trips, here are the categories that most bad trips seem to fall into, of the ones that I, learned about. And so these are the kind of things that you might encounter, because this is what many people have encountered. So I tried to use good judgment in terms of what I was reporting, and synthesize the anecdotal information so that it was so that I synthesize it in a way that wasn't, sloppy or advocacy, wasn't playing an advocate's role, but rather this is what the majority of people that I was able to learn from recommend or have experienced. So that's that, it's like, in a way, a community book. It's a community sourced and I want to say guidebook because it's not, but it's a community sourced reference.
Which is beautiful. I love that. That seems to be your signature in everything you do, is the community piece. So thank you for that. I super appreciate it. There's a couple of questions here. One person wanted to know if you came across any information or saw any positive results for people dealing with PTSD.
Oh yeah. So there's maybe you've been following the news, but there was the FDA just gave a big thumbs down to legalizing MDMA for therapeutic purposes for PTSD. And that's because the science just wasn't up to par yet. They have more work to do. And other psychedelic companies are looking at their psychedelic products and saying, how can we do better science? That said, I spent a bunch of time learning about what vets are going through. They are using both MDMA or psilocybin, magic mushrooms. And I spoke a lot with a fellow from Heroic Hearts, which is an organization for veterans that sends them on retreats for treatment for their PTSD. And there's a lot of integration and a big therapeutic angle. So there's always sort of vets accompanying vets on these retreats. And they have had better success than the drugs that are currently prescribed to these folks. The PTSD is, has a lot of it's a big tent. So there, I spoke with and learned a lot about folks who had a form of PTSD as the result of sudden death in the family, like the death of a child, death of a spouse, but particularly the death of a child. Sudden death of a child seems to, slam people. and they develop a kind of PTSD. The symptoms are very similar. So there are actually grief retreats. One in particular that I wrote about and talked to their grief counselors at length about, that are trying to use psilocybin in legal retreats in Jamaica to treat that kind of perpetual grief. But people are also looking for private guides to, they might be, for whatever, fearful about going on retreat with other people. They want a private situation. And so those folks, manage to find someone who will help them. Turns out that there's a added benefit of, seems to be that there's an added benefit of treating stuff like PTSD in a community setting. Because after the retreats, the folks who had their trips, they're all separately, but they had them in the same space at the same time. They bond and they continue to, will create a support group afterwards. This is not uncommon, where they'll share, their ongoing kind of revelations about their experience. So PTSD is, yes, being addressed not numerous ways, all the same way with psilocybin, but it's the different aspects or avenues by which PTSD happens is being addressed. Grief, war. Right now, there's a study going on. There's a research going on in in pandemic first responders. And that's a really vulnerable group. I mean, all those nurses and stuff. I mean, I wrote some in the book. I have some notes of the emails that first responders here in New York City were sharing with each other in the hospitals, and they're having these, people are like dying in the halls, intubated, all doing terribly, and they're writing to each other and they're saying, "There's no way I'm not going to have PTSD after this." And I was thinking, well, there's a study going on right now to maybe help you with that.
Fascinating. Thank you for that response. There's a question in the chat. I'm going to change the question up a little bit because I'm not sure we can answer it specifically. But Denise is asking about elevated liver enzymes and whether she should avoid psychedelics. And I'm thinking with that question, what comes to mind for me, not answering somebody's specific medical question, but where would someone go? Where can you direct people who might want to get that information? Who would they talk to? Where would they go? Who might be able to help them figure that out?
So this is a really, really difficult problem. And I'm glad, Denise, that you brought it up. Because the studies that are going on right now by the medical establishment, basically, and companies that have psilocybin analogs that they're trying to test so that they can eventually market, they are not in a place where they're studying interactions with anything. The people in the studies tend to be healthy except for the single thing that they're looking to address, like depression. So they're not interested in folks with depression and cardiac disease, or depression and diabetes. That complicates the studies. They're not there yet. They're just not big enough. These tend to be really, really small. A lot of them are phase 1, some are phase 2, very, very few are phase 3. So there's no information or little information. There's some information, there's some anecdotal information. What I could find, I reported. But things like people will ask questions like, can you take psilocybin when you're on your period? And, the best answer I could find was somebody was saying, well, if you have a fuck it all kind of period and fuck everybody sort of day, then maybe not. Because psychedelics are amplifiers, and so it'll just make things work. What if you have a concussion? There's some information about interactions with various drugs like SSRIs and and other medications. But they and I list those, and you can actually find I find those lists on the internet. But will it affect liver enzymes? Nobody knows. I mean, you can try to figure it out for yourself based on what the drug is doing. I mean, your liver breaks down the mushroom, right? Or your stomach enzymes break down the mushroom, and then when the psilocybin molecule encounters your liver and the acids in your gut, it shears off one of the molecules, one of the parts of psilocybin, the molecule psilocybin, changing it to something that's a little bit more slippery and can travel in your bloodstream, called psilocin. So it passes through your liver on its way to, freedom in your bloodstream and eventual docking on on your neurons in your brain, and maybe in your stomach too. So it's passing through your liver, but beyond that, I've never seen any information, and there's a real dearth of it. That would fall into the unknown, but not unknowable category.
That's a fabulous response. Thank you. I love hearing how it moves through the body and how it affects the body. It's so interesting. And then another question about addiction. What are I think you might have either alluded to it or even mentioned it briefly, but can you say a couple words about its applications in addiction?
Yeah, so it's used by a lot of people to counter or to get past addictions. And I know people anecdotally I've spoken to, and then there's groups. And then it's been studied in a research facilities. So anecdotally, I know folks who have substituted alcohol, for example, with mushrooms. So they kind of get high, but they don't have this, they're able to separate themselves from the alcohol. Then there's folks who are in recovery that are organized. There's a whole bunch of psychedelics and recovery groups. Well, there's one main group with a lot of mini groups with it. So it would be women using psychedelics in recovery, or queer people using psychedelics in recovery, men using it, so there's all these subgroups. And so they're in a situation where they do recovery programs. However, you're not allowed to use any drugs, right? If they're in recovery. So they have to sort of create their own support groups. And they do. And then there is research that's going on. And there's one fellow who is a wonderful researcher in Alabama. And he just recently did, 2 years ago, I guess, did a study on cocaine abuse and psilocybin. And he found it very effective for helping people. He found it, and the same thing goes with tobacco, for example. It's had really good responses. It's like more effective than the patch. I mean, it's not 100%, but it's effective enough to make it medical, to make it medically important, socially important. And anyway, so he's doing this study on cocaine, and he had an interesting concept as to, I'm trying to remember his name right now. It'll come to me in a second. He was wonderful, but he had an interesting concept of why it works. He says that he thinks that psilocybin functions on one's sense of guilt versus shame. He said that when let's say you're on a diet and you fall off your diet and have a cupcake, if you feel shame about falling off your diet, like I'm a bad person, I can't stay on my diet, I suck, then it's much harder to recover, and then people fall back. Whereas if you feel guilt, like I screwed up, I shouldn't have done it, I won't do it next time, then recovery can continue. And he thinks that what the psilocybin does is that it switches the narrative or one's personal experience with whatever they're addicted to, from being one associated with, I do this because I'm a bad person, to I do this because I'm a flawed person. And that's liberating. And that's like how this drug can, it sort of changes your perception of yourself, or it can change your perception of yourself, which is the healing.
So just a follow-up question about that, and I'm not sure if this was what the person was wanting to get at. Have
Peter
you
Hendricks, by the way, Dr. Peter Hendricks, University of Alabama.
Peter Hendricks.
Yeah, he's fabulous.
Is there any indication that there can be an addictive nature to psilocybin?
In general, it is not considered a drug of addiction. Who knows? I mean, I suppose it could happen, but but it is a drug that can cause tolerance. So, if you consume psilocybin products or magic mushrooms, if you consume them frequently, then their impact lessens. So, for example, this is significant for people who are microdosers. And it's why a lot of protocols call for these breaks in microdosing. So, it's rare that a microdosing protocol will be just microdose every day, because within a certain amount of whatever it is for you, but within a certain amount of time, it's not going to work anymore. You develop tolerance. So as a result, the protocols that people who advise about microdosing suggest, and they vary, but they're basically a few days on, a few days off, or 1 day on, a few days off, or whatever their particular prescription is. You break it up, clear the drug out of your system before taking the next dose, in order to avoid tolerance.
Wonderful, thank you. We are going over our time, and I realized I missed one question, so maybe we'll end with this question, if that's okay with you. And it might be a longer answer, but you can maybe give the short version. Can you name a couple ways that having a psilocybin experience have contributed to your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's weird that for me, my trips, and I've done them in these different capacities. Well, okay, so two things. One is, I used magic mushrooms throughout my research, really to try them in different settings with different groups of people to get a better sense of their experience. But of course, I was having my own experience. And everyone would always say beforehand, set your intention. And I was like, it was kind of hard for me to set my intention because I was a little embarrassed about it. And the truth is, I was feeling like, I'm going to be a senior citizen when this book comes out. And I was feeling like I was kind of aging out of culture, like I was a human VHS or something. And it was sort of bumming me out. And I was feeling kind of bad about myself. And so I really kept wanting to get some lessons from the mushroom about how to be just cooler with getting older. And the various trips, a year of tripping really did kind of change things, my perspective of things. I mean, one of them was that it helped me realize, I'm sorry, my hair's blowing around, but I have a fan on me. It's New York City. It's really hot. But one of the things that I became super aware of is that I walk through life with fear of death. My mother had a terrible, debilitating, long-term disease that is genetic. And so I'm like, and I didn't realize how much it had infiltrated my kind of fears about growing older. So things like that were insightful. Not that they changed so much. It's just that I got some agency over these kind of deep-seated fears, mainly by just defining them. recognizing that I was experiencing them. And then the other thing that happened, which I know may resonate with some of you, probably not, but I just really became less uptight about stuff. It was fabulous, and it's at the end of the book, I describe how, like, I give an example, and I'll just tell you a story. So it used to be, so we have this cabin in Colorado, and we would do a pig roast, community pig roast every couple of years. And we get a pig and we do a pit and all that. It was a big ordeal, but it was really fun. Then my grown son, a few years ago, he said, my friends and I will take over the pig roast for you. And I was like, that sounds great. And then I told them everything they had to do. I was like, so controlling about everything. And it got to the point where they would just come up to me and like, so what do we do next? And it's like I couldn't let go of the whole thing. I couldn't trust. I don't know. I was just a sort of a drag about it. And as a result, they had no autonomy and didn't do it themselves. And I felt like I was working too hard as a result of all this. Then a few years of doing the mushrooms, next time they wanted to do a pig roast, wow, it was so different. I was like, yeah, just stuff it with whatever you can find on the property. And, and then when they had to do the wrap the pig and all that, I went antiquing with my sister-in-law, and I came back. I just gave up. I just gave it up. I was like, I trust them and I want them to do it. And as a result, even though there was all kinds of mishaps over the course of the weekend, the only thing I remember about it is not like what went wrong and how uptight I was and how much work I did. Only thing I remember is that it was just, the pig was delicious. So it's been a kind of, it's great. My brother-in-law, when he was leaving the pig roast, he said to my husband, wow, Gina seems so relaxed. And Kevin goes, it's the mushrooms. So I don't know, that has been a personal benefit for me. Less controlling, less type A, more just being comfortable trusting others and letting things happen.
Lovely. Thank you. That's a great place to put a period until the fall when we see you at the 8th Annual Mycelium Mysteries Conference. And I want to mention to everybody, Eugenia's book is not out until November, correct? Or is it October?
Yeah.
October. And so what you want to do is you want to go to your local bookstore or wherever you purchase your books and pre-order the book, because that will help to boost, I believe, the number that will be printed. And
no, totally. Pre-orders, by the way, sorry to interrupt, Linda, but folks don't realize this, but this is the new reality for authors. Pre-orders determines your PR budget. It determines everything. I think that maybe it's related to the fact that so many books are produced now by like social folks with huge social media. So the company knows, okay, we can get 100,000 people to buy this book because of their social media following. But for writers like me, sort of writers, it's it's a different bag. And so we all are in this position of saying, please pre-order, because it gives the publisher confidence that the book is going to do all right. And then they give it the PR funds that actually get it to the next level. So anyway, and also, so it just means you'll wait, but.
And those of you who come to Mycelium Mysteries will have book plates, and Eugenia will be signing them. And then when you get your book, you can have your signed book plate. So, and it's mushroom shaped, which is super cool. Yeah. So I'm excited to get my book plate.
Thanks.
Yeah, so please go and pre-order the book. Also sign up for Mycelium Mysteries so you can spend some time with Eugenia in person and with the rest of us. So I'm going to turn it over to Ashley, but Eugenia, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you about your new book and this topic.
Thank you. I'm really, really thrilled. Stream of consciousness. Sorry about that, everybody, but it's so exciting. This is the first time I've talked about the book to anybody. So I'm just like full of facts and stories and things like that, but I'm so happy to share them with with the Mycelial Mysteries this fall.
Thank you. We can't wait to see you in person.
Awesome. That was wonderful. So thank you, Linda and Eugenia, for this inspiring conversation. It was really powerful and definitely thought-provoking. As someone who just came back from Electric Forest, it definitely adds a little bit of enlightenment to, that scene. And thank you to everyone for attending tonight. We appreciate your time, attention, and participation. So let's give away some goodies, shall we? For the winners tonight, please email your full name to herbwomen@gmail.com so that we can contact you. So give me just a second here and I will pick a couple winners. All right, so first we're going to do the book. And looks like Corey Tallman. So if you could send your email and name to herbwomen@gmail, that would be wonderful.
I'll make a book plate for you, and we can send it in the mail.
Thank you. Okay. And so here we go for Mycelium Mysteries Conference full recording package. Tina Senyuk, is that how you say your last name? If you can send your information to herbwomen@gmail.com. And last but not least, the final giveaway for the evening, our Fungal Fundamentals Part 1.
Which is an online course.
Yes, through our Women Classroom. Mary's iPhone. So Mary, if you could send your information to herbwomen@gmail.com. We'll send you all the information that you need to access that course. All right, so a reminder that the past community conversations like this one are archived on herbwomenclassroom.com. So you can watch out for the newsletter and check out all of our social media platforms for future conversations. And the community conversations are free. So if you want to sign up for our past ones, you can do that and get that delivered right to your inbox. We'd like to thank everyone for attending tonight's event, especially Linda and Eugenia for a powerful conversation. And we look forward to seeing all of you at future Midwest Women's Herbal events. So thank you and good night.